Okay, are we streaming? It looks good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Let me do this. All right. And it looks like it's fine. It's fine? Yes. Okay. Sorry. Welcome to you all. And for our weekly satsang. This satsang will be a little different because I'm sitting alone here in our lecture hall, our small lecture hall, because it snowed last night here in central New Jersey. Roads were slippery, so I asked all of our students not to come for programs today. But that means we can have a nice satsang. The local students can still send me questions by email, and of course, a lot of our online students have already sent good questions by email, and we'll go through those questions right now. Again, there are more questions than we can get to, so I apologize in advance if I can't get to your question. First question is from Ajay, who lives nearby here in New Jersey. Ajay asks, I have a fun question for you, he says. Have you personally encountered any events or situations or people where something happened that you couldn't explain away with natural physical laws? And he gives the example of Satya Sai Baba, producing ashes out of his bhasma or vibhuti. He would produce in his hand and he would give it to his devotees. Have I ever witnessed anything like that? And Ajay is looking to have some fun, and I'm sorry, Ajay, I'm going to disappoint you greatly, because I've never witnessed anything extraordinary. I've had extraordinary experiences I'll come to in just a minute, but I've never seen a human being performing an extraordinary action or having some kind of siddhi, miraculous power. In fact, my experience has always been the opposite, in that I've always ended up disappointed by the ordinariness of so many of the spiritual figures I've met over the years. Doesn't mean I've met great teachers, but maybe this example will explain it. And some of you may have heard this example from me before. In 1986, my very first trip to India, I was in the foothills of the Himalayas outside of Rishikesh, spent half a day walking up a mountainside to visit a sadhu, a holy man who had been living in a cave for 10 years and practicing maunam, not speaking to anyone. When I arrived at that cave, I encountered one disappointment after another. I walked up that mountainside with great expectations. It was my first trip to India, after all. But this Mauni Baba, the silent sadhu, was quite ordinary, at least in his appearance and demeanor. When I arrived, he was reading a newspaper, a Hindi newspaper, which is surprising. If you live in a cave, if you live at home and read a newspaper, that makes sense. But why live in a cave if you still want to read newspapers? Other things I found very ordinary. His leg was vibrating like this as he sat cross-legged in front of his in front of his cave, that's often a sign of inner tension. And the last example I give is he was practicing maunam, silence, but he had some assistants taking care of him, and he would order them around by pointing and making st. He would make noises with his mind, with his mouth, to get their attention. So, he was, I expected something miraculous and found something quite ordinary. And certainly in coming and going to India many, many times over the years, I've encountered so many other great, people who were considered great saints, and I've never experienced any miraculous powers or any siddhis. By the way, the siddhis of Satya Sai Baba have been disproved. There are videos on YouTube demonstrating how he produced the ash, how he would create lingas, Shiva lingas, out of his mouth. This has all been kind of recorded and disproved on YouTube videos. I'm sorry to disappoint Ajay, but that's the way it goes. Even my own guru, Puja Swami Dayananda Saraswati, I lived with him for years. And I saw his greatness as a teacher, but I never witnessed anything miraculous. And this leads to a bigger point. And the bigger point, and I think a far more important point, is that sometimes we look for miraculous powers or siddhis to support or authenticate the validity of some kind of spiritual tradition. We look for external external support. I'm looking for another word, it's not coming. Some common examples of that. This first example is we look for miraculous activities or miracles. Many people look for miracles to substantiate their religious beliefs. This is certainly true in Christianity, in Islam, and absolutely in Hinduism. My point is, these miracles may or may not exist. That's not the point. The point is the validity of an authentic religious or spiritual tradition. Its authenticity doesn't depend on external validation, and that was the word I was looking for. External validation is not necessary if the spiritual tradition establishes its own value. And that is absolutely true about the tradition of Advaita Vedanta. Yet many people look outside for validation. For example, in Advaita Vedanta, many people will look to other spiritual traditions and say, look, Buddhism teaches the same thing with regard to this particular topic. Well, that may or may not be true, but Vedanta doesn't depend on the agreement with Buddhism or any other spiritual or religious tradition. Another bigger problem today is when people look to science to validate the teachings of Advaita Vedanta. They look for places where Vedanta and modern science teach the same thing, and those correspondences, again, may or may not exist, but that doesn't make any difference. Vedanta does not depend on being validated by science, by other spiritual traditions, by other by miracles. The authenticity and power of any spiritual or religious tradition is established by the tradition itself, what it teaches, its practices, and so forth, and therefore requires no external validation. Okay, we got a bunch of other questions coming here. This is Jason from Cheshire, England. How does identify with Brahman remove all suffering? I fully understand how identifying with Brahman would reduce mental and physical suffering, but how would it be completely removed? What does intense pain feel like for someone in that case? Well, first of all, we have to differentiate between pain and suffering. Pain is a sensation. Pain can be a physical sensation in your body. Pain can be an emotional feeling in your mind. And any human being, including enlightened beings, feel pain. Normal, natural. Suffering, however, is completely different from pain. Pain is a sensation, physical or emotional. Suffering, a good way of describing suffering, is our negative reaction to that pain. When we want the pain to go away, when we go on complaining, when it makes us miserable, all of that suffering is removed so that an enlightened person experiences physical and emotional pain without a trace of suffering. Being enlightened is to be completely comfortable in the presence even of intense pain. So in this way, pain is not removed. Suffering is completely removed in this way. And the way it works, of course, and just to finish up this question, the way it works is the pain belongs, physical pain belongs to your body. Emotional pain belongs to your mind, and as long as you're identified with your body and mind, suffering is inescapable. But, as Jason and all of you understand, an enlightened person does no longer identify with the body and mind, so that in the view of the enlightened person, physical pain belongs to the physical body, emotional pain belongs to the mind, and I am okay in spite of the presence of physical or emotional pain. That is the view of the enlightened person. Okay, let's see here. Next question here from Vishesha, who lives in Virginia. And Vishesha asks, you have mentioned that the Vedas say that doing karmas cannot give moksha to anyone. The Upanishads, the latter part of the Vedas. Earlier part of the Vedas actually says you should do karmas, especially you should do rituals, but those rituals don't give you moksha. Those rituals help you accumulate good karma and go to some heavenly domain or get a better rebirth after you die. So it's the later Upanishads that make the point, doing any kind of karma, any kind of ritual, any kind of saintly deed, all of these things cannot give moksha to anyone, moksha liberation. Vishesha's question then is, then where did the custom of taking a bath in the Ganga river to attain moksha come from? So there is a tradition that says if you take a bath in the Ganga, the sacred river in North India, Ganges, but the tradition is not that it gives you moksha, but that it removes sin, papa karma. The tradition is not to claim that it gives moksha. No action can give moksha. And there's a little bit of logic for that statement. And the logic we discussed in some of our more technical classes. The logic goes like this. For a small goal, you require a small effort. For a medium-sized goal, you require a medium-sized effort. How would you describe moksha? As a small goal? As a medium-sized goal? And I joked with someone, I said it's an off-the-chart goal. So for an off-the-chart goal, you would require an infinite effort. And infinite effort suggests not just one bath in the Ganga, but an infinite number of baths in the Ganga. So it's not, really speaking, bathing in the Ganga is for the sake of removing sin. And it does so when it's done as a prayer. So what is the intent of your bath in the Ganga? I've lived in Rishikesh for a while, and long ago, not recently. And I used to watch, actually nowadays, back in those days, not much, but nowadays there is river rafting in the Ganges just north of Rishikesh. So they come down the Ganga in a raft with a guide, and they're tourists. Maybe half of Indian origin and half are foreign travelers. And they enjoy themselves going down the river, and it's really, really a beautiful river, especially above the Rishikesh. It's just all mountain gorges, and it is exquisite in its beauty. So it's nice. They can come down the river in these rafts. Suppose a tourist falls off the raft into the Ganga. I'm sure that must happen a lot. Are they immediately freed of all their sins by accidentally falling off the raft? You get my point. When a pious pilgrim takes a bath in the Ganga with a prayerful mood and with the shraddha, with the faith, with the conviction that bathing in the Ganga will wash away all my sins, that pilgrim, that pious pilgrim, will absolutely be blessed. But falling off a raft, he'll get wet. He might enjoy himself falling off that raft. Okay, next. From Kartik, who lives in India, Kartik writes, I am an introvert, and I often get judged by people about my personality, and I get misunderstood. Join the club. It reminds me of my youth. How can I navigate these situations in everyday life and accept myself for who I am, even though others keep judging me? And we're back to this validation thing. If your self-acceptance depends on validation from others, it's common, but certainly it's undesirable. Through a process of spiritual and emotional growth, you come to a point where your judgment of yourself is based on your own experience and doesn't depend on the judgments of others whatsoever. You say that you get misunderstood. Others always misunderstand us. In fact, we should expect it. We should be surprised when we are properly understood, because the fact is, Kartik, you and I and everyone else in the world, we're all so complicated. And to be honest, it's difficult for us to understand ourselves. Even people closest to us, like parents and spouses. Does a parent or spouse will understand you, fine. Understand you completely? Completely? No. So if a parent or spouse who knows you so well cannot understand you fully and completely, then what to speak of someone else? It's really a false... just distracted here, just checking all of this. Sorry. It is a false expectation that everyone should understand us. I'll give a funny example. Years ago, when I lived at my guru's ashram in Pennsylvania, I used to travel a lot and teach all over the country. Sometimes I travel by car, by airplane, and I always wear this dress because I have great respect and value for this tradition. So imagine the scenes I encountered while traveling in this country wearing this dress. For example, when I was driving a car, by the way, in Pennsylvania, you have to pump your own gasoline when you pull over to a petrol station. This is, I think, unique in the entire country. No, that's in New Jersey. Excuse me, in New Jersey, you have to pump your own gas. So when I was driving myself to programs, this is like 30 years ago, driving in New Jersey, which is just next to Pennsylvania, I would pull into a petrol station to get gas. I would stand out, and dressed like this, I would be pumping gas. What do you think other people thought about me? I have no idea. I don't care. No doubt some of them thought I was a weird kook wearing orange bed sheets. That's in their head. And if they don't know me, then why should I consider their opinions important if they don't know me? So anyway, just sharing that with you, Kartik, to give you some ideas of how to cope with these judgments of others. Everyone deals with that. Next question from Arun, who lives in Bangalore. Please elaborate on samanya chaitanya and vishesha chaitanya mentioned in the Katha Upanishad. I'm a little confused because the Katha Upanishad doesn't use that language. It never uses the word samanya chaitanya, which means general consciousness, or vishesha chaitanya, special or distinct consciousness. Katha Upanishad doesn't use that particular language. So I have a feeling Arun is referring to some other terms. On the other hand, the Katha Upanishads and the whole literature make a distinction between two kinds of consciousness. One is consciousness as such, and the other is consciousness with some kind of conditioning. So we used the term nirguna and saguna to describe consciousness. Consciousness can be nirguna. An example of that would be the so-called nirvikalpa samadhi. Nirvikalpa means nirguna. And nirvikalpa samadhi is a condition in which your consciousness remains utterly unaffected by anything, completely isolated, completely untouched, completely separate from everything else, consciousness remaining exactly as it is with no external influence. That would be consciousness in the state of nirvikalpa samadhi. The counterexample, and by the way, that could be called samanya chaitanya. The other term, vishesha chaitanya, specific chaitanya. Again, these terms are not, in fact, they're not common terms at all. But to consider the consciousness present in your experience right now, you're not in your experience right now is consciousness and so much more. For example, you're watching me. You're having the experience of seeing my body, hearing my voice, and all of these experiences get associated with consciousness. Rather, I should say, consciousness gets associated with all of these experiences. So consciousness associated with whatever you see and hear right now could be called vishesha chaitanya. Basically, it's whatever you're experiencing right now. So consciousness plus the conditioning due to your mind, your thoughts, your perceptions, your emotions. When you put these two factors together, consciousness, which is by nature, the essence of consciousness is nirguna, but when that consciousness gets associated with mind, that consciousness becomes saguna, as though conditioned by whatever is happening in your mind. Good question. Next question comes from Cody. And Cody asks, can I get enlightened without the personal teaching of a guru? Personal, he says. Can I get enlightened just by reading books and watching video of a real enlightened guru who truly knows the scripture? And because I live in a country where there are no Vedanta gurus. There are many countries where it's not taught, and I have no budget to go to study in India or anywhere else. So, is it necessary to have personal contact with a guru to get enlightened? And here, let's go back to our earlier discussion. The guru doesn't have any magic power that he or she will use to make you enlightened in his or her immediate presence. You know, there are some traditions where the guru kind of touches you on the head or touches you in the middle of the forehead and transmits some kind of power to you, some kind of initiation. This is, at least for me, this stuff doesn't hold water, as there's an American idiom that says that. I don't find these things meaningful. The power of a guru, and Cody correctly said, an enlightened guru who truly knows the scripture. And I would just add one more thing. So by reading books and watching videos, that would be okay if, and here we have to put some big qualifications. Can you get enlightened by reading books and watching videos? Yes, if. And there are a bunch of ifs. One is, and perhaps the biggest if, is it depends on you. If you are a mature, qualified student, we used the term adhikari. If you are prepared through lots of spiritual practice, that would be the biggest if. So let's presume that you've done lots and lots of sincere and rigorous spiritual practice, and you are fully prepared, you're ready for enlightenment. So you watch the Guru's videos, you read the Guru's books. Will you get enlightened? More ifs. So if, and you got one right, if the Guru really is enlightened, one who's not enlightened obviously is not going to make you enlightened. And secondly, he says, knows the scripture. That is also an important requirement, because all of the teachings that lead you to the precipice of enlightenment, all of these teachings come from scriptures. In particular, they start in the Upanishads and the Vedas, and then continue with the later scriptures of Shankaracharya and others. But I would just add one more if, and a pretty important if, and that is the teacher should be enlightened, the teacher should know the scriptures, and the teacher should be a skillful teacher. You know, there's something about the use of words. If the teacher is enlightened and knows the scriptures, but the language they use is unclear, if they are for whatever reason incapable of leading you to discover or understand what the Guru understands, if they lack some kind of skill of teaching, it may not work. My Guru was just such a masterful teacher, his use of words and language. And I think as his disciple, I've come to appreciate the value of and power of words and the necessity of expressing yourself with great clarity and using words with great care. So I would say if all of those conditions are met, then you could get enlightened without personal contact with the guru. We said if the guru is enlightened, if the guru is knowledgeable in the scriptures, and if the guru has adequate teaching skills. And then one more if. Remember, I said it was the biggest if. The biggest if is if you are a fully qualified and prepared student. Personal contact is always helpful. Although, watching videos, you're all watching this video right now. Somehow, watching videos is almost as effective as being in a guru's presence. In fact, this is a funny way of putting it. What is the distance between guru and shishya, between teacher and student? Depends on how you define that distance. If you are in the guru's presence, if you're sitting in the front row of the hall, you're quite close. If you're sitting in the back, and if you're sitting in the very back row of the hall, you're watching, your guru is this big. He's so far away, in a very large hall. And here's a funny comparison. Right now, you might be thousands and thousands of miles away from New Jersey, where I live. But you're watching a video. What is the distance between the screen you're watching and your eyes? That's very close. That proximity means a lot. To watch a guru from the back of a hall is one thing. To be in the guru's presence for the sake of understanding completely. Again, the guru doesn't have some kind of magic power or aura that's going to rub off on you if you are personally present with that guru. Okay, enough said. Next question from Anand. Anand lives in New York City. With regard to my remarks last week's satsang about choosing an ishta devata, choosing a particular form of God for the sake of worship. And a rather long question, let me paraphrase. Anand asks, and I said, that you not only have the freedom to choose an ishta devata, I said you have a responsibility to choose an ishta devata, a chosen form of God, for the sake of prayer and meditation. That's exactly what I said. You have a responsibility to choose an ishta devata for the sake of prayer and meditation. Now, Anand's question, I'll paraphrase, has to do with this Shanmata puja or Shanrupa puja. It's called different things. It's a puja, it's ritual worship of 6 forms of God. In which you worship Ishvara as Lord Ganesha, as Lord Shiva, as Lord Vishnu, as Goddess Devi, as Kartikeya, son of Shiva, and Surya, God in the form of sun. These 6. That form of worship in which all 6 are worshipped is said to come from Shankara. That's perhaps doubtful, but anyway, it's a very old and revered tradition. And Anand's question is resolving or reconciling, I should say, these 2 comments. I said you should choose an individual ishta devata, and Anand questions, well then how can I still perform this traditional puja in which you worship 6 forms of God, not 1? Notice what I said is you should have an ishta devata for prayer and meditation. I didn't say anything about puja. Puja is ritual worship, and I didn't say you shouldn't, by the way, I didn't say you shouldn't worship any other kind of God, or you shouldn't pray to any other form of God, or you shouldn't meditate on any other form of God. I said you should have one special form of God that you are particularly focused on for the sake of gaining depth. You know, the old story is if you're trying to dig a well and get water, if you dig many shallow holes in the ground, you may not find water, but if you dig one deep hole, you can find water. This is the general principle. I don't see any conflict at all between doing this traditional worship of 6 deities or any other kind of worship can be done. It's wonderful, an excellent form of worship, but that doesn't replace having a chosen form, ishta devata, that you develop over a period of years for the sake of very deep prayer and meditation. Worship is a different thing altogether. So I don't see any conflict. You can do both, and nice to do both. Next question from Vaidya. Doesn't say where Vaidya lives. According to Vedanta, the mind, including its memory function, is completely shut down in deep sleep. That means nothing is recorded during deep sleep. Yet, it is a common experience that we remember our peaceful deep sleep as soon as we wake up. Can you explain what's really happening? Well, there are actually, this is a complicated topic, at least in the commentaries on texts. There's 2 arguments about this experience. One argument is, yes, your mind is absolutely inert at the time. Remember, your mind doesn't get destroyed in deep sleep. Your mind enters a state of dissolution. So in deep sleep, your mind is present, but it is completely inactive. This is what is taught. So you could argue that there is no memory in deep sleep. And then why do you recall that, oh, I slept well last night? And that could easily be an inference. That is to say, when you wake up and you feel refreshed, you feel quiet, you feel peaceful, based on how you feel when you wake up, you might infer that you slept, you might infer that you experienced perfect peace in deep sleep, that you had the experience of perfect peace in deep sleep, complete silence, and you recalled it, but it might not be a recollection, it might not be a memory, it might be inference. This is one argument. And mostly in Vedanta, we dismiss this argument. And for technical reasons that I'll spare you the details. Instead, the response given by traditional teachers is this. As I said, the mind is not absent in deep sleep. It is completely present, but in a subtle form, sukshma. That is, it's not in an active form, it is in an inactive form. And the traditional explanation given by scholars of Vedanta over the centuries is that when your mind is in this subtle form, it is capable of a subtle experience. Not a normal experience, but a subtle experience. An awake mind has a normal experience. A sleeping mind is capable of a subtle experience, like a dreaming mind is capable of a dream experience. So if a dreaming mind is capable of a dream experience, we can accept that a sleeping mind is capable of some kind of experience that is present in deep sleep, a unique experience in deep sleep, and an experience, if the mind is capable of having an experience, anything experienced gets remembered. So really, experience is primary. Memory is secondary. You can only remember what you experience. So the traditional teachers explains that in deep sleep, your mind is present in a resolved condition. In that resolved condition, your mind is capable of having some kind of subtle experience of dream and of deep sleep, and it is that subtle experience which is then recalled when you wake up. There's lots more we could say, but it gets quite technical. We'll leave that aside. Next question from Sumant. It doesn't say where Sumant lives. As I delve deeper into Vedanta, I've noticed a shift in my interest. I'm losing enthusiasm for activities I once enjoyed, such as talking about career planning and advancement, vacations, dining out, socializing. Instead, I'm drawn to spending more and more time meditating and exploring Vedanta. That's pretty normal, at least in my view. It's normal. The point is, we all pursue in life what we find most valuable. Most people find career advancement, vacations, dining out, and socializing more important than Vedanta. So that's what they do. On the other hand, for Sumant and many of you, you find more value in these teachings of Vedanta and spiritual practices like meditation. So therefore, less attention is given to these other activities. That's normal. In fact, that's good. Obviously, that's good. And it's in and of itself, it's not a problem. But here comes a problem, as Sumanta explains. He says, however, my spouse is not on the same path and still values these activities. Naturally, not surprisingly, there are relatively few people who develop so much value for Vedanta and spiritual practice that they give up, that they are disinclined towards socializing and vacations and all of that. So the problem now that Sumant faces is, I'm unsure how to navigate this situation. Should I continue participating in these activities with his wife? Being with his wife on vacation, dining out, socializing, and view all of this as an opportunity for karma yoga? Excellent. Sumant has answered his own question. It is karma yoga. It is not, if you really understand karma yoga, it is as much a spiritual practice as studying Vedanta books, as meditating, or as watching my videos or anything else. Karma yoga is a powerful spiritual practice. In fact, a practice that helps you in ways that other spiritual practices don't. Spiritual practice like spiritual study, meditation, and watching my videos will not address a particular issue that karma yoga does address. And let me be very specific here. I'm glad Sumant brought this up. Here's the point. When you, Sumant, or anyone else, when you would prefer to stay home and meditate, but your wife wants to go out for dinner or for some social function, when you set aside your own agenda for the sake of fulfilling your dharma as a husband, and you do so without complaint, that's important, you do so with the attitude of a karma yogi. That is, instead of doing what you want, you follow dharma. That is a powerful, powerful spiritual practice. So Sumant, you're absolutely on the right path, And there's no conflict. If your wife wants to go out and do these things, accompany her and enjoy yourself, knowing that you are following Dharma, and by setting aside your own preference not to go out on a social event, by setting aside your own agenda and by following Dharma, that is a powerful spiritual practice, and a spiritual practice that helps you and just to repeat myself, a spiritual practice that helps you in ways that other spiritual practices don't. So an important spiritual practice, crucial spiritual practice. Next question. Oh, good. Next question from Ahmad. Ahmad, where it lives? He lives. I just like it when students include their location. Just nice to include and share. You said that moksha breaks the paradigm of karma, like waking up from a dream. But I'm still confused. Can this paradigm be broken if I still have karma to pay? We took Ahmad's question about this in the last class, and Ahmad is really, it looks to me like the question is being restated. And he goes on to ask here, though, does one, as a prerequisite, have to become completely 100% free of any negative karma debt in order to break through of the paradigm and become enlightened? If you have to be 100% free of all your karma to get enlightened, forget it. Enlightenment becomes impossible. Why? How much karmic debt do you have? Well, a scholarly interpretation of the doctrine of karma would suggest that you have had an infinite number of prior lives, and in that infinite number of prior lives, you've accumulated an infinite karmic debt. How long will it take you to pay off 100% that karmic debt? This, by the way, the doctrine of karma is a really complicated matter. We won't get into the details here. But the scriptures and great teachers like Shankara address this very directly by saying it is utterly impossible to gain moksha. Let me rephrase myself. It is utterly impossible to have as a precondition to moksha getting rid of karma. So the solution to all this karma is not to pay off karmic debt. But the example, for those of you who didn't attend the last satsang, let me give you very briefly the story. I think I told Ahmad in the last class to describe this. I said, if I gave the example of having a dream in which you commit murder and you are sentenced to life in prison, and you're in your dream. In your dream, you are in your prison cell day after day after day, feeling so miserable. Say, why did I commit murder? Why did I do that? How did that happen? And then you wake up. And the example shows that you have a life prison term in your dream, and when you wake up, that prison term, lifelong prison term, is utterly gone. This waking up metaphor is actually used by many scriptural teachers, and it makes this crucial point, and that is, karma is not an absolute reality. Karma is a relative reality. Relative reality means karma is as real as this chair. Karma is as real as this body. Makes sense. Karma is as real as the body which performs karma. Karma is not as real as your true nature. your essence as Satchidananda Atma, pure consciousness, uncreated, unborn, unchanging, limitless. That's another kind of reality. Just like you wake up from a dream into a higher order of reality, if I can use that term. We would say then that your essential nature is of a higher order of reality than karma. You can wake up out of karma, metaphorically speaking, because karma isn't as real as your true nature. Next question from Gordon, who lives in Glasgow, Scotland. Nice questions. You know, every week I'm just so pleased by the quality of these questions. Gordon asks, I'd like to know more about the proper place of moral judgment in the context of Advaita Vedanta. Moral judgment would be the discernment of dharma. In our Sanskrit language, in our Vedantic nomenclature, to discern dharma. With full understanding, we know that everyone is the way they are and they do what they do due to so many causes. That is, everything happens for a reason. And then he goes on to say, and ultimately, they are Brahman. Everything is Brahman. Does this rule out moral judgment? Perhaps metaphysically, yes, but it still has a social cycle. Okay, this is, yeah, if we say, let's make this a little bit more concrete instead of getting metaphysical here. Someone who commits murder is a manifestation of Brahman. Saint and sinner are equally manifestations of the same fundamental reality, Brahman. The saint is a saint for thousands and thousands of reasons. The murderer is a murderer for thousands and thousands of reasons. So this is kind of what gives rise to Gordon's question, and that is, well, then where is, he uses the term moral judgment or discernment of dharma is what I used, and what Gordon neglected to talk about is the role of free will. Everything happens for a reason, and one of those many reasons is choice, free will. The saint is a saint for many reasons. One of those reasons is free will, not the only reason, but one of many reasons the saint is a saint is because the choices he or she has made in their lives, choices born of free will. In the same way, the murderer is a murderer for many, many reasons, and one crucial reason is free will. That is to say that the murderer made many bad choices in his or her life, and those bad choices contributed to that person becoming a murderer. So, in terms of our experience, we all have free will. The whole doctrine of karma is based on free will. Based on free will, with this free will in mind, what Gordon calls moral judgment comes down to this. We must use our free will to follow dharma. That's what he calls moral judgment. We would say is the use of free will to avoid adharma, to avoid causing harm to anyone or anything, including oneself, and to instead choose to live in such a way that we cause minimum harm. Minimum harm to the environment, minimum harm to other human beings, minimum harm to ourself. And that's where moral judgment would come in. All right, next. from Om Prakash, who lives in Texas. Oh, interesting. I used to do puja along with my mother every morning. After I went through your teachings on both the Uddhava Gita and Upadesha Sahasri, I realized that puja and rituals should not be performed for those who are seeking moksha, for those who are seeking enlightenment. I don't think I ever said puja and rituals should not be performed. I know I didn't say that. I wouldn't have said that. Anyway, we'll come back to that. That's why I stopped doing puja, and my mom is upset. She should be upset. And she says that your guru taught you something that's wrong. I don't think I said. In fact, I'm sure I never said that if you are a sincere seeker of moksha, liberation, you should not do puja or any other kind of ritual. I never, ever say such things. What I do say, and what is important to understand, is that the mere performance of rituals will not lead to moksha. We had that question earlier. And this is a common confusion for a great number of people. They think that all they have to do is to do these rituals and they don't have to do anything else. Which means if you do rituals, look at this. This is certainly not what's happening for Om Prakash, and probably not his mother either. But many people have this idea that if I do my morning prayers and rituals, I have done all the spiritual practice I need to do in a given day, which means I don't need any kind of spiritual instruction, any kind of spiritual study, any kind of scriptural study. I don't need scriptures because I've done my rituals. I don't need to meditate. Why meditate? I've done my rituals. I don't need to practice karma yoga, which means I can do anything else I want the rest of the day as long as I start the day with my rituals. It's pretty obvious that such a narrow focus on the performance of rituals is really unhealthy, undesirable, unhelpful. So let us understand clearly. I do rituals, I do prayers. Why not? They're helpful. You do whatever is helpful in spiritual life. For Om Prakash to continue doing the rituals would be more helpful for Om Prakash and perhaps more helpful for his mother and for their relationship. So Om Prakash, I would encourage you to continue doing those rituals. And please understand, it's not that you shouldn't do rituals, it's that rituals alone are insufficient for genuine spiritual growth. That's the point. All right. Next from Amit, who lives in India. As one advances spiritually, does one automatically become more loving and compassionate? Does one automatically become more loving and compassionate over time? And the short answer, I would say, is yes, absolutely. We'll get into it. Over time, he continues, over time we realize with the help of these teachings that everyone has the same consciousness, so while we accept people as manifestations, but they still have different personalities that can be a daily challenge. People are manipulative. Someone has an axe to grind. Scamsters are also increasing, and he goes on like this. So let me conclude here. So, as you grow spiritually, you become more loving and compassionate. Does it mean that you become more vulnerable to scamsters? Does it mean that you allow other people to manipulate you and hurt you? So let me just make a bad joke here. As you advance, this is a bad joke, I'm warning you in advance. As you advance spiritually, you do indeed become more loving and more compassionate. You do not become more stupid. Sorry for the bad joke. Which means you still have a power of discernment. So you are loving and compassionate, more so, but doesn't mean you love being scammed. So if someone is doing a scam, you avoid it because you still have intelligence, you still have the power of discernment. If someone is being manipulative, you can still be compassionate to the person and love them. My guru said, some people, nice, just his language is so nice. He said, some people are like a cactus. What does he mean? You can't hug a cactus. You have to love some people from a distance, was his exact words. So if somebody is manipulative or harmful, maybe you have to love them from a distance. So becoming more loving and compassionate doesn't mean becoming more vulnerable to being hurt or abused by others in any way. Okay, just a one, maybe, where are we here? This is from Angela. Can Surya, the sun, goddess sun, be one's ishta devata? Absolutely. Many people pray the Gayatri mantra with Surya, sun, as their ishta devata. And let's see, we'll make this the last question. Sheila, who lives in Bangalore, she asks, what's the difference between manitvam, which will translate as pride, and ahankara? And here, language is a little bit of a problem because manitvam and ahankara can both mean pride in Sanskrit and in vernacular languages. Actually, I'm not sure manitvam may not be a vernacular term, but ahankara is most often used in Hindi and other languages in a sense of pride. In Advaita Vedanta, we use ahankara as a technical term. Doesn't mean pride. Ahankara in Advaita Vedanta specifically means the feeling of being an individual person. Right now, you feel like an individual person because of a mental activity called ahankara is present. That mental activity called ahankara is not always present. In deep sleep, for example, you don't feel like an individual person because the ahankara is resolved in deep sleep. Also in meditation and some forms of absorption, you don't feel like an individual. Whenever the ahankara resolves, whenever that mental activity called ahankara resolves, you no longer feel like an individual person like you feel right now. Obviously, that's very different than pride. Pride is having an unrealistic estimation of your own greatness, of your own values. You all understand that very well. I think this would be a good time to conclude our satsang. Very nice different to just share this only with online students, not having our local students here. Both ways are very pleasurable. I'm glad you could all attend this satsang, and we'll conclude with our prayers. Om sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet, asato ma satgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityor ma amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat. See you next time.